Hey guys, today we're in the book of 2 Kings chapter 4. So today we really get to see some of the ministry of Elisha. Now remember, Elisha is the prophet who took over after Elijah. We see several miracles here, and they all should kind of remind you of something, point you to something. And we'll talk more about that at the end. It starts out with one of them where there was a widow who did not have any money. And so they were going to take her sons into slavery to pay her debts. Now remember, slavery in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament is not like the slavery in America. You would sell yourself into slavery. You would work until you paid off that debt, and then you were set free, or you worked until the year of Jubilee, and then you were set free. And so basically she comes to Elisha and says, oh my goodness, I can't pay. What's going on? And what's amazing about this is Elisha says, go outside and borrow vessels from all of your neighbors, empty vessels and not too few. For this widow woman to go and to ask people for empty vessels, there would have had to been explanation. She would have had to explain what she needed this for, why she needed this. Also, she had to put her faith into action, right? And so she has to actually get up and do something to show that she's going to have faith, that even though this is weird, that God is going to do something, that God will help. And he tells her to get vessels not too few. Get as many as you possibly can. And he told her that when she comes home to start pouring out the little bit of oil that she has into these vessels. And she continues and she continues and she continues, filling up every vessel that she has. And then when every vessel is full, then she runs out of oil. It says, then the oil stopped flowing. What's amazing about this miracle is the miracle lasted as long or as much as the faith of the widow woman. He told her to go get as many containers as possible. And so how many ever she got, however much faith that she had that Lord was going to give her, that's exactly what the Lord did. Could she have got more? Yes. Would the Lord fill those up? Yes. Could she have got less? Yes. Would the Lord fill those up? Yes. And so as much faith as this widow woman had is the exact size of the miracle she had. It's just an interesting concept of teaching us faith in actions. Then one day Elisha goes up, and there was a wealthy woman, and she started taking care of him as he was coming in to do ministry, even so much that it became regular, so regular that she went to her husband, and she said, let us make a small room for Elisha. Let us make a place for him to stay. He's here all the time. He should have his own place. And so she did this. She did this, and it was an amazing place of ministry for Elisha. But Elisha comes to her and says, man, your faith is amazing that you're doing this. What can God do for you, right? And so eventually this woman has no child, so he tells her she's going to have a child. And it's exactly what she does. She was born a son. Well, as years go by and as Elisha keeps coming in and kind of moving on in ministry, one day this son died. And so this woman, the Shunammite woman, goes up and says, I'm going to go tell Elisha myself. And so she travels with a servant and travels to find Elisha, and she finds Elisha, and she says, listen, I didn't have a son, but the Lord through you gave me a son, and now I'm heartbroken. And so Elisha is heartbroken as well. In verse 27, it says that the Lord has hidden it from me. The Lord did not reveal to Elisha that this is what had happened. And so this woman comes up, and Elisha tells his servant to, hey, go run before me, take my staff and lay it on the dead son, right? Lay it on him, on the face of the child. He does that, and the child did not awake. And so Elisha comes to the house, and he comes and he saw the child lying. So he went in, shut the door, and he went up and laid on the child. We've seen this before, right? Elisha is doing exactly the same thing that Elijah did all the way back into Kings, right? In the first Kings. And so he's doing the exact same thing that Elijah has done. He lays on the child, he gets up, he lays down, he gets up, he lays down, and the flesh of the child becomes warm. Then the child sneezed. Then the child opened his eyes. And then he tells the woman her son is alive, and she falls at his feet, bowing to the ground. And so we see another miracle, once again showing the faith of this woman, right? Not only did her son die, but then she went to Elisha. She believed that he could do something. Her faith was proven in actions. And then lastly, the last miracle, Elisha is coming to Gilgal, right? Remember where Israel crosses over the Jordan coming into the promised land. He's at Gilgal, and there's a famine in the land. Well, we're going to hear more about this famine. It's a 7-year famine in chapter 8 of this book, but there's a famine going on. And the prophets are sitting around, and Elijah says, hey, go out and find something to cook that we may make a soup, a stew. And he does this. And so they begin to eat of it, and they cried out, there is death in the pot. What they tasted was not good, and they knew it was deadly. Now, knowing what we know now, we know it as a wild cucumber. It grows near the Dead Sea, and it is just a gourd that grows on a vine, but what really happens is it causes colic. Colic so bad that it can cause people to die, right? And so Elisha says, hey, bring some flour, and he sprinkles some flour, and he says, hey, the pot is good to eat. The flour did nothing. The miracle is what Elisha did, right? He made, or God, through God, made it able to eat. And then we see one last miracle. A man comes and he brings some bread, 20 loaves of barley, fresh ears of grain in a sack. And Elisha said, give it to the men to eat. But his servant said, how can I set this before 100 men? So he prayed to give them to eat that they might eat. And so what had happened is this man brings 20 loaves of bread, right? And it is multiplied to feed 100 men. When we think a loaf of bread, we think a humongous loaf, but that's not necessarily the case. Think of like a thicker tortilla, right? So one piece of bread for one man would have been minimum at that time. And so he had enough to feed 20, but it multiplies and feeds 1,000. And they ate and they had some left. What's amazing about these miracles is not just Elijah has done this, now Elisha has done this, but during this time, right, about 800 years later, 800 years after this, there's going to be a man stepping on the scene named Jesus. And Jesus is going to do many of these same miracles, right? He's going to take care of a widow woman. He's going to bring dead people back to life. He's going to multiply food. He's going to heal the sick. He's going to do all these things. So when Jesus steps on the scene, though the prophets have said this is the power of the Messiah, this is also bringing into recollection to these Jews, these prophets, Elijah, Elisha, that this is a man who has the power of God just as the prophets did. But he will come to show that how he is different is he's not just another prophet, he is God. He is God Almighty, His Word in the flesh. And that's what the book of John does so well, showing us that Jesus truly is the great I Am. He is God Almighty. Hope that makes a little bit more sense, and we will see you tomorrow in chapter 5. God bless.